we've got a roll call. Sue Gennaro, we have with us all 5 members of the board: Sue Gennaro, John Schneller, Bill Foote, Cindy Shagnon, myself, Jay Nash. We also have Mike Fournier, Tom LaLiberty, Lisa Ambrosio, and Bob Jazokis is with us this evening. Before we get to the public comment section, Mike, you wanted to, or I guess I should affirm agenda item. Sorry. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
I had if possible, could we talk about one minor change to the school calendar?
Okay. You want to do that after the?
Yeah. Yep. That would be great.
So we'll add a number 5 school calendar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any objections to that, anybody? Okay, without objection. And then before the comments, you wanted to
I have a couple
say
things
a few words, update everybody. And
yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, sure.
So a couple of things. First, thank you everyone for being here this evening. I appreciate it. And thank you for Bedford High School for hosting this meeting. So I have a couple of things. We did receive 2 comments on the comment form today, but they actually came in not as comments, as questions. So we'll enter those in the minutes, and I have forwarded those to the principals of McKelvey and Riddlebrook, where those comments or those questions are best going to be answered. So those will be sent out, they'll be in the record, and we'll answer those questions. So thank you for those of you who use the comment form. The next piece of information that I want people to know and understand is if you had the opportunity to look at the reopening plan that was published to the website after the 20th, you'll notice that there was one that said revised July 27th, 2020. There were just some minor changes made to that I want to make you aware of. The first changes were we had received a number of questions, appropriately so, regarding the difference between hybrid instruction and remote or distance learning. So we put links in the introduction so people could see the definition and the differences. So there's links there. We've also tightened up the requirements for mask wearing. So those are a little bit more clear for people to understand with respect to the requirements for masks in the schools. And then lastly, when you scroll all the way down to the bottom of that document, there's sort of a multicolored sheet. Internally, we refer to that as the rainbow document. And what we did was we simply merged the cells where the language was exactly alike. So if you recall, there was a section for preschool, elementary, intermediate, middle, and high. If the language was exactly the same, we just merged those cells so it would be easier reading and people wouldn't have to hunt and peck for the information. So those were really the major points. So that's housekeeping. And before we start, I'm imagining there's going to be some comments about the reopening plan since this is our only agenda item. So I do have a statement that I'd like to read for the community. We are in a global pandemic, and not one person, one group of people, or one organization has all of the answers. The answers we do know, however, are these. The Bedford School District is committed to teaching our students. We are committed to keeping our students safe, our staff safe, and our community safe. We are committed to doing the best that we can with the information that we have. On June 3rd, a group of 60 individuals consisting of teachers, parents, administrators, doctors, public health officials, and our students met with the objective of how Bedford might return our students to school in the fall. That group of dedicated individuals put their own personal needs aside to develop a recommendation that would meet 2 very distinct objectives. The first objective was to maintain the health and safety of everyone in the Bedford School District and our community. The second objective was to provide the best educational experience for all students given the circumstances that are before us. After reading and researching every article, journal, and study that we could find, the task force narrowed down its work into what we have called our anchor documents. These are not the only reference points used, but they are the ones that coalesce the best evidence we have found to date. And we found a bottom line. The safety of our students, staff, and community, the following recommendations were accepted and are integral to our plan. Number 1, social distancing with 6 feet of separation. Number 2, wearing masks. Number 3, frequent hand washing, and sanitizing. These are universally accepted tools as a means of a multi-layered approach of protection and the prevention of the transmission and reduction of viruses. Everyone in our community, regardless of point of view, is anxious to have students return to school full-time in an environment that is safe. This is true of the task force, our school administrators, our staff, and our community. However, schools are the most densely populated buildings in our communities. We cannot socially distance 4,500 students in our schools at 6 feet apart. The math simply does not work. Not one industry in our community has opened up at 100%. Our state was quick to close and slow to open. This is why our infection rates are good when compared to the rest of the country. Now is not the time to buck that trend. Hundreds of hours have been spent developing a plan while reviewing every email, idea, and conversation about the best way to move forward. Each member of the task force and Bedford's leadership team has struggled day in and day out to find a solution for our kids in our community. We recognize that this plan may not be what everyone wants, but we know it is what we need to successfully run our schools. I urge you to join me in confidently moving forward, thoughtfully opening our schools, and sending our unwavering support to the students, teachers, and families in the Bedford School District. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Comments and written statements from the public. So I'd like to, before we get started on that, I'd like to say a couple of things. One, because we may have a lot of comments as we did last time. You put it on the mask trick isn't going to work, Phil. It just slides right off my face. Apologies. If you can try to keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes, that would be as per our board guidelines. That would be extremely helpful, especially to the rest of the folks who might want to have their comments heard by the board. The second thing I would ask you to do is we're encouraging public participation at these meetings. We have for a long time, and that means we want to hear from everybody, not just the popular opinions. So if you can refrain from expressions of support or disagreement while you're in here, you can go out into the foyer or out into the parking lot, but while you're here, if you can refrain from spontaneous expressions of agreement or disagreement, I'd really appreciate it when we get to the comments. Okay, thank you. Is there anything else? Does anybody have any comments for us tonight? So just tell us your name, your address, who you are, and the floor is yours.
Sure. Walt Kennedy, 7 Amber Lane. First, I would like to echo the sentiments of someone who spoke last week about the lack of options presented to the school board. I spent 30 years in the Army, and during my time as a staff officer, if I presented a plan to my commander that had only one course of action from which to choose, I would have been fired. And as a commander, if my staff had provided me only one option from which to choose during mission planning, I would have fired them. But that's where we are. Tonight you are voting on a plan with one option. And this option is less than optimal for the majority of Bedford parents who have specifically expressed their desire to have their kids back in school full-time. Virtually all private schools will be beginning the year with full-time in-classroom learning. Do they know something that we don't know? No? They have the same data that we do. Private schools just don't have the option of being paid if their plan for returning to school is not what the parents and student want. This school district gets our money regardless. And I come from a long line of teachers on my father's side of the family. My sister's been a teacher and administrator for 30 years. I've always believed that teachers truly care for their students almost as much as we, the parents, do. My experience since we moved to Bedford has not changed that viewpoint. But I do have a question now. Where are the teachers? The CDC, the AAP, and virtually every other major medical or educational organization say that it's absolutely critical to get our children back in school. We know the negative consequences if we don't. The CDC director has stated that we now have more people dying of suicide and drug overdose than we do of COVID. If teachers care about the kids, why aren't they demanding that schools reopen with full-time in-person learning? They know that is best for the kids. Risk, you might say. Well, I know a little bit about risk from my previous career as well. The average age of those dying from COVID is 80 years old. The risk to those under 65 is low. Under 45, minimal, and to children, virtually non-existent. Of the millions of cases of COVID around the world, there is not one documented case of transmission from a student to a teacher. So why aren't teachers demanding kids go back full-time? You're not going to get much lower risk than that. During an explanation of the plan last week, it was explained that things could open up more once things get better with COVID. How can things get better? Seriously, that's a question. What's the metric? We have no cases of COVID among students and no cases among teachers. How are you going to get better than that? When are we going to open up? When does this end? The children want to go back to school in order to get the education that they want and need. They have experienced remote learning, which is a big part of this hybrid plan, and they know that it's not the same. They deserve the support of the teachers and the school board in getting the education they deserve. For those with underlying conditions, or for parents who just don't feel comfortable sending their kids back, they should have the option to stay home. I strongly urge you to reject this plan tonight, go back to the drawing board, and devise and approve a plan that follows the data and the science, puts students first, and gets them safely back in the classroom. Thank you.
Sorry, can you hear me? Hi, I'm Dr. Kara Duville-Kopp, resident of Bedford at 82 Hitching Post Lane, and a pediatrician in Southern New Hampshire for the past 17 years. I'm the mother of 4 children in the Bedford Public Schools. I'm an advocate of public school education. I am a scientist as well, and I follow data. I was misquoted last week in the Union Leader, or maybe I wasn't succinct in expressing my opinion and concerns. I was quoted as saying that COVID isn't that bad. COVID is bad. It's scary for certain demographic populations. 1 death is too many from COVID. But influenza and measles and polio and Ebola and SARS also concern me. Depression and anxiety and suicide, they scare the hell out of me. What I meant to convey last week is that COVID is not that bad in New Hampshire, with the exception of disease in our elderly. If we are vigilant and don't become complacent, we can continue with some of the lowest numbers of infections and deaths in this country. Before I just want to say, Superintendent Fournier, I respect you completely. We used to do CrossFit together. You may not remember. I was thinner. It was fun. But what you expressed tonight was your opinion, that we should not buck the trend. That is your opinion, and I'm expressing mine. So I just don't want everyone in here and watching to take your word for word. We all have opinions. They are all valid. But bucking the trend is probably something New Hampshire should do right now, because we can. I am in favor of full return, sorry about that, trying new mask designs. I'm in favor of full return to school in the fall. I know that's not what you're voting on tonight, but I feel that the choice of hybrid isn't the best one. You are exposed 50% in school or not exposed at all remotely. I feel that the choice should be full-time in school learning with adequate safety protocols in place or remote learning 100%. I hope I was clear last week that I think we can minimize the risk of transmission significantly if protocols are in place in our schools. It is my understanding and pretty clear from last week that no actual specifics have been worked through to sanitize desks, doorknobs, handrails, bathrooms, etc. These protocols are absolutely required for us to return part-time or full-time. There needs to be written protocols in place and complete transparency regarding what is cleaned and when. I know there isn't great guidance on this, so we have to make the best educated decisions we can. I was thinking before and after class changes or something like that. Someone has to sit down and figure this out. I've spent also, who's regulating mask wearing and bus cleaning between trips? I've spent an extensive amount of time compiling questions for each school to keep our children and our more at-risk teachers safe. And I'm happy to share these once I can recover them from my computer that crashed, which is why I'm on my phone. As I mentioned, I'm a scientist and I look at numbers. the major transmission factor is person-to-person in close contact, usually prolonged and in crowded environments, and when not practicing social distancing of 3 to 6 feet. Yes, 3 feet has been felt to be quite near the safety distance of 6 feet. The question of airborne is still controversial. The most recent data show that there have been 0 deaths in New Hampshire in years 0 to 19. There has been 1 death in the age group 20 to 29. 95.5% of deaths have occurred in 60 to 80 plus, with the majority of 62% of deaths in 80 plus. Now, that is absolutely tragic, that our most loved and wise elderly are dying, but they are mostly dying in facilities. That's not our job to fix. I'd love to fix it, it's not our job. This clearly needs to be looked at more in depth, but our focus should be on our children, our future. Of the 680 kids positive in New Hampshire, only 9 who have tested positive. It doesn't mean they're currently infected. I just want to be clear. Only 9 were hospitalized, and again, 0 died. People are comparing COVID to influenza. I agree to some extent. Influenza actually scares me more because it has the ability to mutate much more easily. It does a bait and switch. You get 2 virus strains at the same time, they're gonna and fool you. COVID doesn't do that, as far as we can tell. But we have a vaccine for influenza. The reported number of deaths in the 2017-18 flu season was 187 children. As of 7/23/20, there have been 76 deaths of children, or 0.03% of cases in the US. Although it's always incredibly tragic to lose even 1 child, the numbers are incredibly low. Our job as professionals, educators, public health experts, and parents is to weigh the risk to benefit ratio. I completely respect the opinions and choices of parents who choose to keep their children home until a vaccine is available, and I completely respect the choices of teachers to teach remotely or choose another option because they have underlying medical conditions that put them or their family at risk. But the majority of our children will not get sick or get seriously ill. I believe quite strongly that keeping healthy children home is a detriment to their social and emotional development. Sure, there will be a minority of those who thrive remotely, minority, and their parents can choose that option. But I'm willing to take the very small risk that my children, 13, and 11, could get sick, versus a much higher risk that they will not get the adequate education that they need and deserve in this particular community.
Doctor,
I'm almost done. Last
okay,
paragraph.
all right.
That has such a low rate of COVID-19 infections. I'm particularly concerned about our most vulnerable and those with 504s and IEPs. This is not about risk elimination. Just like it is with the flu, it's not about risk elimination, it's about risk reduction. Please vote no to the hybrid remote model and instead pursue a full-time remote model option. And I'm happy to continue to be part of the conversation and implementation of safety protocols along with other parent volunteers.
Thank you.
How's everybody doing tonight? Scott Young, I forgot to introduce myself last time. I live at 1 Belmont Court here in Bedford. I read the statements from my at the time, 8-year-old daughter when it comes to how remote learning impacted her. What I have, I think, for a problem is a lot of people, you keep hearing, oh, well, 10 and over, and transmission rates and this and that and the other. How about somebody start talking about 10 and under and how all this really impacts them and what that's going to do for the future of their learning for the rest of their school careers? What is this setting the tone for? I appreciate there's a partial reopening, although I hear now the union has an issue with that. It's a discussion for another day, I guess. We also heard from persons on the board that maybe looking at some other options, such as the plexiglass, or finding out exactly how many households, not just per student, wishes of wanting to go back to school, to try to get a more accurate number when we never heard anything from that. So I don't know if anybody really bothered to solicit data for that. I understand there's a lot of unknowns. Unknowns can be scary, but at the same time, if everybody was afraid of the unknown, none of us would even be here. So complete risk aversion is something that you just can't do. You can't. If everybody did that, they would never leave home. Nobody would ever leave home. Parents could never go back to work. Households will go bankrupt. You start looking at, well, how are the people that have to work supposed to bounce that with their employer, you know, on the days that they need to watch their younger kids that are under 10, that, you know, I'm sorry, I don't have all the money to afford extra daycare. Someone has to stay with that child. You know, it'd be great if I could, but I can't. And there's plenty other parents that can't do it either. So I understand everybody's trying to do what's best for everybody. Let's start looking at what it's going to do to the younger people. The older people, juniors, seniors, you know, even some of the middle schoolers, I know do just fine at remote learning, and they can deal with a lot more. They're more mature, they're grown up. The younger kids, they're getting beat down here. They really are. And everybody needs to start looking at that as well. You know, and I'm tired of hearing, well, kids will bounce back. Look at what it's doing to some of them now. Some of these kids may never bounce back. And that's what I'm afraid of. That's why I wanted to give voice to the younger kids and their parents. So, everybody have a wonderful evening. I don't think you should vote yes, especially since there's no other options and no other data was collected, or it doesn't seem like anybody took anything else into account that was talked about last week. So, have a good night.
Thank you.
My name is Sam Como. I live on 12 Lynn Drive. I'm a student at BHS. I find it extremely concerning and disheartening that parents are considering letting their children go back to school full time when we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We should not be going back to school full time. Multiple people up here have stated that the only way to be safe is to keep everyone 6 feet apart, even 3 feet apart, one person said. To have everyone wear masks. We can't do that in school. You can't stay 6 feet apart in the halls. You can't stay 6 feet apart in the classroom. And it's going to be extremely difficult to regulate masks. I think that the hybrid option is a much better option than going back full time. And I highly implore that the school board do not vote no to this and then just go straight to having us go back full time. That is extremely dangerous. This is a new pandemic, and I'm not going to claim to be a medical expert, but what I'm going to say is that this is a new pandemic and there's new data constantly coming out about it, we could learn as soon as we vote against this and then let the school open up fully again, we could learn that the pandemic might have a much higher death rate or that it might be dangerous to children in other ways. We can't allow ourselves to be at risk of this. And I've noticed that a lot of people have been saying that students really want to go back, but the majority of students that I've talked to said that they don't want to go back because they're scared of getting COVID. So thank you, and please do not let us go back full time.
Hello there, my name is Khadijah Mir. I'm actually a recent graduate from BHS, but today I wanted to talk for the teachers who have always made sure that I was in a safe environment, because I don't feel like this environment is safe for them, mainly because they're not getting enough input in this plan. I know that in the beginning of this, you said that there were 60 individuals comprised of teachers and other stakeholders. However, I don't feel like 60 individuals represent the entire amount of stakeholders, and I know that would be hard. However, the teachers that I've spoken to, or the individuals that I've spoken to, everyone has some sort of different opinion that is based on their own experience with remote learning or different experiences. I don't want to go off track of my script because I don't want to waste your time, so I'm just going to start. I want to ask two things from the community and the school board today. Firstly, to the board, I want you guys to grant our teachers the full right and unconditional option to go to school. I understand that many teachers are saying, not many teachers, many parents are saying that if parents don't feel comfortable, then they don't send their kids. I feel like that option should also be applicable to teachers. If they do not feel comfortable, they don't have to show a doctor's note. They should have the unconditional option to stay home if they want to. Secondly, I ask that we relieve the societal pressure that we are currently putting on our teachers. The tone that I've been seeing with teachers recently seems beyond disturbing. We're critiquing unions rather than listening to them. And I understand that there's a lot of debate going around this, again, because of different experiences. However, the tone that we've been using with our teachers is extremely disturbing. With the last school board meeting, I heard some people say that if teachers do not want to work, they're replaceable. However, I've been through this year. I know that the quality of the education that we pride ourselves on today is only developed and defined by our teachers. So to lose them willingly is to show potential new teachers that we do not value their opinions, therefore their lives in this matter. Hence, I believe that we must treat our teachers with the utmost respect as they are the pride of this community and the pride of the communities that we go into as VHS graduates, and I can speak to this personally. To revisit my other point that we need to value teachers more, in my personal opinion, as the pandemic began, our needs escalated, but our sympathy for one another did not, and I feel like students and parents and teachers, everyone started nitpicking the remote learning system. I did too. I had a lot of problem with communication. However, the administrators had warned us beforehand that there would be such issues. So with this horrible circumstances that we have, there are a lot of compromises, and I feel like as a community, we need to understand that and stop putting so much pressure on teachers by saying you must work or you're going to get fired. Overall, I ask that the board consider the teachers' opinion more. So if you do further modifications to this plan, or as some people are suggesting, go back to the drawing board and make a new plan, I ask that you use the teachers' input more because they are directly affected as they are direct stakeholders in this. I will end with asking my community to cherish our blessings that we are granted with. Our teachers are absolutely amazing and they're put in really, really hard circumstances. So please give our teachers respect and understand them and listen to them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Will Janelle. I'm a rising senior at BHS, and I think overall the hybrid plan is a little bit unrealistic in some ways as to how severe the virus really is. I think for one thing that a lot of people are worried about is the education of our students, and I think that education is very, very important, but safety should always come first. I think that, definitely we've seen over the spring, many students are not able to adapt to remote learning very well, but at the same time, I think it is much more important that we keep them safe and that we look to accommodate them on the other side of this whole pandemic, and that we look to bring them back up afterwards, because I feel that I think it's, especially like with colleges, we've seen a lot of colleges are willing to recognize and accommodate for educational problems that people have had due to remote learning. Many people in the class of 2020 did not do very well due to remote learning, but they were still able to get into college. And I think that we should be able, with all the great teachers that we have in our district, we should absolutely be able to offer those same kinds of accommodations on the other side of the pandemic once we are able to go back to full in-person learning. So I feel that we will be able to recover from this as far as education goes. And I feel that for the time being, safety should 100% take precedent. I think a lot of people underestimate just how severe the virus is within our own communities at the moment. Just last Friday, there were 57 new cases in New Hampshire alone, and the CDC estimates that for every diagnosis, there is about 6 to 24 actual cases. So even with the most generous estimates, we are getting hundreds of new cases in our state every single day. And many of those go undiagnosed or asymptomatic, and then they end up being spread as a result of that. I don't think that we're in a position to be lenient with the virus in any way yet. I think we need to keep taking this seriously. Also, I do recognize that a lot of the guidelines that are in place for how we would do in-person learning, if those guidelines were followed to a T, we would probably be fine, but I think it's really unrealistic to expect that. We've all seen hundreds of instances across the country where many adults refuse to take proper safety precautions, and when they are asked to do so, become agitated. As a result of that, as much as I have hope for my generation, I think it's really unrealistic to expect literal children and teenagers to do better than many of the adults have been recently. And in that way, I think it's not a matter of if these guidelines are going to be broken and put people in danger, but rather a matter of how often. As for the mental health issue, I don't want it to sound like I don't care about mental health. I think everybody is very, very stressed out about the virus right now. I know a lot of people suffer from anxiety and depression, and I think that's extremely important. But at the same time, I think the physical health and safety of students needs to come first when it comes to opening schools. And for one thing, students can, and I know for a fact that many already have, they are able to meet up with their friends outside of school. I don't think we necessarily need to bring everybody back just for the sake of some to be able to see their friends. I think it's and especially a lot of people dealing with anxiety or depression, especially those who may have immunodeficiency or may be at high risk for other reasons. If I was in that position, I would be more scared of being in an environment where I could get the virus than anything else. I don't believe that putting students back in a position where they are more at risk is going to help with their mental health when we can provide other options. I recognize that for many small children, adults rely on school for daycare, and I think that may be a bit of a different situation. But for middle and high school students, I think there's no reason that we shouldn't continue with remote learning. I think it can't be forgotten that this is a matter of life and death, and that if one transmission occurs in our schools, that's one too many. And by the time we know that it's happened, there will have been many others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Okay. Hi, my name is Hasita Kuburi. I go by Lucky, and I live in the Greenfield Farms community here in Bedford. I'd like to start off by saying thank you to the school board and to the task force for their hard work and in coming up with a solution that I believe is the best right now. Last meeting, I spoke about the logic and precedent behind the school board's proposal and why I believed it was the smartest decision. Many people said later that they wanted to know about my emotions, that they wanted to know how I felt. As a student, the question at hand today deals with my future and what I'm willing to do, along with those of almost 5,000 other students in the district. So I'm here today to talk about how I feel. And after speaking with a plethora of other students and friends, I can assure you that I am far from the only one that feels the way that I do. I feel grateful to the teachers for their hard work and willingness to continue teaching during these turbulent times. If a teacher feels unsafe, I don't want to just find someone else. I echo the sentiments of many that Bedford is a special place. But the teachers in this district, the very ones that are at the most risk right now, they are the ones which make Bedford special. I feel uncertain at the future of myself and the world. However much people talk about students being less dangerous and how school won't spread, the fact is we don't completely understand how COVID interacts with kids yet. We don't know exactly how many cases there are around us. We don't have the capacity to implement full contact tracing. The fact is, the amount of instructional time that is accessible in any situation in a pandemic is not and cannot be ideal. After adding on the sanitization, the distancing, and the hygiene that teachers will be responsible for, we can almost be certain that kids will actually have more time to learn during remote learning than in person. Most of all, I feel scared. I fear that if we make a rash decision, something bad will happen and we cannot take it back. I fear I cannot take it back. I cannot take back the death of a family member, the death of any of the lovely teachers who care so much about me, about our community's kids, that they would come to school during a pandemic. Being completely honest, staying at home is mentally difficult. I cannot deny that a routine in a school with other people is important. But if anyone at school, someone maybe who I had waved at earlier in the hallway or gave a little smile, was harmed or worse, dead because of spread, because of an infection, my mental health would spiral. I would not be able to wake up, let alone focus on schoolwork. The guilt and the fear would be overwhelming, far worse than any fear that I feel staying at home. I love every single person in our schools. Every one of them deserves to be safe and protected. Looking at the costs and benefits of each solution has already proved that the most rational decision is the proposal on the table currently. But putting all that aside, I urge you all not to take a risk, however small of a chance you believe it to be, on our lives and on the health of our community. For our sake, it's just not worth it. I urge you to vote yes on the proposal, because if we go back to the drawing board, it'll take too long to come up with a solution, and we're wasting precious time that teachers could be using to come up with a better curriculum and teach us better. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Elsie Munster-Tiger. I'm going into my sophomore year at BHS. I'm in support of the hybrid plan being proposed to the board tonight. As much as I want to go back to school full-time at the start of this year, it would not be responsible to do so. Teachers are so important to our society, and it is not fair for us to demand that they put themselves and their families at the level of risk that comes with exposing themselves to hundreds of students for long durations of time in an enclosed space 5 days a week. Everyone knows someone who is a part of a high-risk population. It's not okay to force teachers and students to choose between their livelihood or education quality and their health and the health of their loved ones. The hybrid model plan being proposed tonight allows for enough in-person instruction that students can build vital relationships with their peers and teachers while also prioritizing the health of students and staff. For these reasons, I urge you, the school board, whose job is to provide a quality education to all students in the district and to provide a safe environment to do so, to vote yes on the hybrid plan tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Malika. I live on Joppa Hill in Bedford, and I'm a rising junior at Bedford High. The number one thing that I really miss at school is our teachers and the effort, dedication, and work that they put into making our lessons and helping us learn. Our academic performance at school is a direct result of the work our teachers and parents put in to push us to the next level. Now, looking at the coronavirus, there's not much that we know. There's not enough research or testing on the virus to prove that this is just like the flu, and that the children and adults in our schools and in our districts can make full recoveries if they counteract it. We don't know what strains of it are present in the United States and whether or not those have mutated and to what extent they have. If even one of our students were to contract it, what would be the protocol to protect teachers and other students? Continuing on, our academics are what make this school so popular. People come to Bedford after looking at what other students have done during their time here. If we were to lose a student, multiple students, or teachers, our academic performance would suffer. Grief, loss, and death are extremely difficult topics to explain to children and to even dissolve as teens. If we were to lose any one person, we wouldn't perform anywhere near the level that we do today. I'm sure that regardless of age, there is not one kid at Bedford School District that knows what it means when someone leaves this world forever. We want to protect the mental health, of our students so that they stay safe, and we cannot do so when they are faced with an unknown virus every single day. Death should not be on the minds of our students as they walk through these halls every day. And losing their jobs because they want to keep their families safe should not be on the minds of our teachers either. Our teachers deserve the right to decide on whether or not they will teach in school or not, without losing their jobs as a result. We cannot jeopardize the lives of students or teachers to open school fully. Any decision that has to be made about the school should prioritize teachers and their abilities to come to school. I understand that quarantine is lonely and difficult, that online learning is not the most helpful for students, that students are being affected negatively both mentally and emotionally and academically. But those are all things that we have control over and can change. We are Bedford. We can help one another. Recently online, I've noticed, and a lot of other juniors and seniors and all sorts of kids at the high school have noticed that there's a couple of pages springing up for Bedford support and kindness. Students are appreciating one another and spreading joy. From this, it's clear that students all know, students all know how important it is to support one another during times like this. We have each other's backs. And we, as a whole, cannot risk the lives of others for what we need, although, those topics we can control. That's all I have, sorry. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Angelica Boulay, and I live at 3 Highgate Drive in Bedford. I'm going into my senior year at Bedford High School, and I'm advocating for a 50-50 hybrid model, half in-person and half remote. It is imperative that a true hybrid model is reached at the high school level, and the current plan changed to accommodate this. It is definitely possible for this plan to be put in place. I understand the superintendent and the school board's concerns regarding the building's capacity, social distancing, and mask wearing, all of which are very important. If the current BHS schedule already accommodates half of the students for the first block of the day, I don't see why this can't be implemented more often into the schedule to have a true 50-50 hybrid plan. If it can be done once, it can be done again. Also, why give only 5 minutes between groups to switch? This is simply not feasible, and students will surely mix and meet each other during this time. This is counterproductive and completely contradicts the purpose of splitting up the students into 2 groups. Many parents and students are looking at other options, and it would be sad to see many students leave the school district because of this inadequate plan. With this being said, I would like the school board and the superintendent to table the plan today and revisit the plan, come up with a better high school schedule. Please vote no on the proposal in front of you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Dr. Holly Mentz. I live at 11 Mountain Road in Bedford. I am the mother of 2 girls. One, Julia, is a rising junior at Bedford High. My other daughter graduated from Bedford High. She's a senior at Lafayette College. She's a chemical engineering major, and she was just informed that her college is pulling back on the decision and going completely remote, which I am, as you can imagine, devastated for her. My other roles, I'm a pediatrician. I've been a pediatrician in this community for 24 years. And I'm also Chief Medical Officer of Ambulatory Services at the Elliott Hospital. I want to make sure that everybody understands that I am here tonight representing my own opinions, but I need to share with you that I have been 12 feet under dealing with the COVID pandemic since the very beginning. I've watched our services have to basically shut down except for emergent care, which has been incredibly painful. The result of this is that there are many, many things that the hospital systems have hoped to invest in our community, such as more services in behavioral health, that we now have to wait on because of the closures that the pandemic has caused. I personally had to shut down 35 offices, which was devastating. And I will share with you that nobody wants kids to go back to school more than me, because again, I have been a pediatrician. I am well versed in the challenges of mental health, and I've watched how it has affected my children. However, in my opinion, what the school board needs to understand is the state is going to make decisions about the number of cases regardless of the age group that's affected. The other thing that I believe the school board needs to understand is that we still very, very much face concerns about limitation of PPE and of testing supplies. We are trying to get as much testing supplies as possible for quick turnaround time, and we are very much challenged. And the Elliott Hospital opened their own gown making operation during the months of March and April because we were so concerned about PPE. I am strongly in favor of the hybrid model, and I will explain why. Again, as I share with you, I recognize the challenges that children face with remote learning. In my opinion, it is more important to put your leg in the water rather than to dive in, unknowing what the near future holds for us. So again, let's say that everybody goes back full time and there are huge numbers of cases in the state. Even if they're in children and the children are not as sick as the elderly populations are, the state will make a decision to shut down in order to preserve the PPE and the testing that the state needs to take care of the people who are affected. In my opinion, this plan is incredibly well thought out. It allows for some in-person teaching, which I think is very important. And in addition, it's a test. You can reassess every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks, the levels in the state, the levels at the school, the number of absences, etc. In addition, I think you all know that we all had to make very, very quick decisions in March, and it was very, very challenging. When my providers ask me, how are we going to manage if there's a second wave? We have a knowledge base now. There's still a lot to learn, but we've done it before, and we can improve on how we manage things in the future. I felt like in March, honestly, I felt like I was building a skyscraper every day, and the next day it was flattened and we had to rebuild. We have knowledge base now of how we manage things, and I consider it probably very symmetric to remote learning. There was an emergency plan put in place due to the emergent nature of the need to flatten the curve and the limitations of supplies and the concerns about extending beyond what our hospital capacities were. There has been time to refine that. So in my opinion, just like I have better knowledge base of how to open my practices and shut down my practices in a relative manner, or draw on some of the knowledge base that we used in order to understand how to manage the care of our population, the remote learning is the same. From what I understand, the tools used in remote learning are going to be greatly improved. And again, it needs to be remembered that the reaction in March was an emergency reaction. So I am happy to serve as a resource for you. I am very, very conscious of how hybrid learning and that part-time learning affects families. I have many, many employees who will be affected because they will not be able to work or they'll have to figure out how to manage their kids being in school half-time. But what I think would be worse for the population is to have a big surge and the entire population shut down again. So I appreciate you taking the time to hear my opinions, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Olivia Parashar. I'm a rising junior at BHS. And I think this plan has so many gaping holes. Yes, it's a good idea. There are some hybrid elements that are obviously very essential. We've seen a lot of statistics in the past be brought up, but there are major issues. Like, what happens if a student gets the coronavirus? What will we do with clubs? What about athletics? So I urge that the committee chairs tables this current event and actually focuses on the reactionary element of the plan. I understand that it's a given that we won't be able to prepare for everything, but we can prepare for some things. And things so basic as what will we do if one student gets the coronavirus is absolutely essential to consider when actually revamping and realizing how we're going to react to this crisis. Furthermore, I know a lot of students don't appreciate being divided by last name. A lot of them would rather be divided by grade level because they feel like they actually can connect with their friends. It's enough to be divided by class. It shouldn't be an issue that you can't see your friends because they were in a different letter of the alphabet than you. With that being said, it's also important to recognize that teachers aren't a force that appears when we need an education and disappears at the end of the school day, and their safety does come first. They have families, they are someone's children, and I know no parent would ever want their child to have to be at a risk of their own life when they go to school or to their work every day. So no, I don't advocate for teachers coming back to school in their entirety. No, I don't advocate for a complete reopening, but this plan does need to be changed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Bemis, and I live at Magazine Street, and I am a speech-language pathologist. So like Holly, we shut down all of our outpatients when the virus hit in March. But unlike most people in this room, I actually have firsthand knowledge because I was in the trenches in the ICU with trached and vented patients. My specialty is swallowing. So on any given day in Massachusetts, we had more patients in my hospital with COVID than the entire state did. So as I was at home watching this, I'm thinking, okay, we need some fact over fear here. I actually am a Johns Hopkins certified COVID trainer also. So what I want people to realize is the transmission of this virus. Yes, 6 feet, but if you have a mask on and you are not with a positive patient for more than 10 to 15 minutes, you're not going to get it. So if you're wearing your mask, the person next to you is wearing their mask, and you're going through the hall, likelihood of transmission is nil. Even with the patients I was seeing, I was doing deep suctioning, which is an aerosol generating procedure, and not one of my staff has COVID. So if we could be involved in that, I think that the teachers do need to come back. You know what? If a nurse didn't want to come back, she didn't have a job. And I know that's a very unpopular sentiment, but I always felt safer at work in the environment of COVID than going to the grocery store. And if you structure your educational time full-time initially, people are going to feel safe once they realize that they can actually step outside their house. But I think we cannot live in fear, because then we are not living. So obviously, I would advocate for people to go back full-time and then adjust if our numbers go higher. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Caitlin Hernack. I live at 14 Newberry Lane, and I am a recent Bedford High School graduate. I'm going to keep my remarks brief because I did not plan on speaking tonight, but I have some concerns about some of the ideas that were aired here. I understand that this issue is extremely complicated and beyond any expertise I could have, and I know that there are so many things that need to be considered: students' sociability, students' mental health, teachers' health, everything. And I know that there's a lot of pressure on this committee to do something about that, and I understand and sympathize with you for that. But I'm really concerned about calls for a further reopening. I think it would be detrimental to student and teacher health, as well as any person that they might come in contact with, such as their family. I think if you're comfortable asking students or asking teachers to put themselves and their families' lives at risk, then you can consider further reopening. If you're comfortable considering asking students who live with high-risk family members to put their family members at risk and choose between their family and their education, then consider reopening further. But I beg of you to choose the lives of the students of teachers before any other things, because that is what will weigh on these people for long-term. Yes, a year could be bad, but losing a parent, losing a grandparent, losing a teacher, losing a peer, that is not something that you can get over easily. That will stay with you for life. I beg of you to choose the lives of the people in this school district. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anybody else? We're going to limit comments to just one.
Super fast. Just want to say that what you're.
I really don't want to promote a debate.
I'm not promoting a debate.
Okay.
I'm
And
saying-
you've had some extra time already to speak to the board.
I'm sorry. I'm stating the facts that no one is asking a child or a teacher to choose between life and death.
Okay, thank you.
And the other thing is the woman who was trained from Johns Hopkins. The woman who was trained from Johns Hopkins about COVID. It is true. I feel silly that people who, people who are 10 to 15 feet apart do not need to wear masks. If everyone in the school wore masks, even passing within 1 to 2 feet, masks have been shown to decrease spread. That is a fact. I just want to make sure everyone understands that.
Thank you.
Very quickly, my name is Penelope. I live at 7 Puritan Drive, and I just want to say that I believe that our teachers' lives are very, very important, and that we should be considering hazard pay for them in this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anybody else? Because this is going to be it for public comments. Okay, thank you. Lost my paper. Okay, Mike, we're at the school reopening plan, and this is where I know you had your the public statement beforehand, but you're asking us to ratify this hybrid reopening plan that you put before us. It's hard. I got to look this way and then look at you.
No, that's fine.
So instead of just saying, what do you guys think? If we'd like to kind of go about this in a little more of a direct manner, I've got a suggestion to do that. I would start by saying we could probably work through if any of us have any questions for Mike, and I know that since there was a lot of attention on the high school, if Bob's here, if you want to ask any questions of Mike or Bob before we get into parliamentary procedures here, we could kind of do that. Does that sound like a good place to start? Any questions about the plan that's on the table that we want to clarify? Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I know it's not in there now. I think it should be in the plan now. It may just be a result of the fact that you've been working, my guess is anywhere between 70 and 100 hours a week per person, which should be applauded. I know you have everyone's best interest, and there are a whole lot of people who have an interest in mind, and again, I applaud your efforts. But a couple things that haven't been talked about at all, which is things like athletic, extra curricular clubs, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't want to have that discussion right here unless you have a quick 2-second answer. What I would like to know is, and someone made a quick point about this, but I think it bears a little bit deeper thinking, is how are we going to review, starting, and I think the point was well made, in advance of the school opening, how are we going to review where we stand relative to where we would need to be to snap, turn on a dime, and go into a fully occupied model, which is where we were a year ago before any of this nastiness was laid at our feet. So I know there's been some level of thinking about that. I haven't heard anything from the administration about that. I would like to hear that. And I would also like to say that at present, I'm going to have great difficulty supporting the plan as is if nothing is inserted in writing and verbally and in writing given a full commitment by the administration that we will review on a 2-week basis. I don't know what's appropriate. We can ask some of the epidemiologists who have generously given some of their time to us to be what would be an adequate review process. But when can we turn on a dime and get our kids back into school? And to address many of the comments out there, and Jay, cut me off if I'm not being appropriate and I'm going on too much, please.
Do it.
I know you will. CDC, by the way, the CDC came out on July 23rd, which is after our last meeting. AAOP, I believe it's the Children's Center in Toronto, the leading pediatric center in London, and we've had people say, oh, who cares about overseas? Well, I do, because they have experience, and we're supposed to be taking an experience-based approach. But the bottom line is, we need to be able to turn on a dime as administration, and to consider supporting this plan, will have to see it in writing and see that element of a plan inserted. And you know, just a few points to comments.
To the question, so there, I mean, because I have that question as well, which is, you know, where are we on the?
Yes, I think I've heard three. I think I've heard 3 questions, and so I can answer them in the order they were asked. So I can tell you right now, we have 172 students that are participating in athletic workouts, and I say workouts at a 9-to-1 ratio. In Bedford currently, we have 650 students who are signed up for fall athletics, but the fall athletics is still a question mark because the executive board for NHIAA doesn't meet until Thursday. The athletic directors in Southern New Hampshire expect them to delay the decision on what to do with athletics. My understanding is that football would typically start August 14th, and the rest of fall sports would start the 17th. But sort of the fly in the ointment is, number one, not all school districts have deployed their plans. And so Bedford is really ahead of the curve in terms of having something, and other school districts are not. And so they're looking to put off that decision a little bit. But as of right now, we do have students participating in workouts. So those are the 2 quick answers for athletics. Then your next question is a very good one, and that question, the answer is as follows. Once all of this work was done to sort of get us where we needed to be, the very next job was I put a call out to 2 Bedford residents who happened to be infectious disease doctors, and said, can we sit down and put together a metric by which it can be clear and transparent as to how we transition from one phase to the next. And so the expectation would be that we are going to develop something whereby there would be a level of phases. So the concept of being able to transition from, so for example, schools fully open with no PPE and everyone back to normal, all the way to fully remote and no one in school and everything in between. And there are transition periods in between those. And so what I learned from those conversations was the 2 metrics that the state had used when they shut down were the numbers 5% and 9% were sort of the metrics that they were using. And so we are going to have to figure out
9% of what?
9% infection rate were the numbers that we had discussed. I'm not suggesting that those are going to be our numbers. My understanding is a 5% infection rate of those tested was my understanding at the time.
Of those tested, so not of the school.
Correct. And that was state of New Hampshire.
Right.
So our plan at this juncture is to put something like that together. Now, the other really piece to the puzzle that's really important is, to many of the people's comments here, is there's also a constituency factor that we need to be mindful of. And so if we were to look at the statistics as to how many infections there were in the state of New Hampshire on March 13th, when the schools went fully closed, and how many infections there are in the state of New Hampshire now, there are currently more infections now than there were on March 13th, but we're all in a different place. And so I'm going to be not only working with those doctors, but with other superintendents to come up with what is a regionally and locally, what are some good metrics, but those, we don't have those solid yet.
So things like hospitalizations and deaths don't come into it. It's more a question of, because the more you test, the more infections you're going to find. So it's a cycling.
There are some experts that have indicated that hospitalizations and death do matter, and there are some experts have indicated that positive active cases, which are on the dashboard of the DHHS, are most important. And then the other factor that's really, I think, the most important for Bedford schools will be, do we have any cases among our students and or staff? I think that will be the real driving data point for us.
So to come back, and I cut myself off because a lot of this is, reactionary to the comments that have been made. CDC and AARP, as of 7/23, said definitively it is safer to send our kids back to school full-time than to keep our kids out of school. And I know you have that documentation. If you haven't read it or you have it in a different form, I'd be happy to send it to you. But I didn't just pull the date 7/23 out of thin air. And this is increasingly the guidance of the greater medical community. So much as I appreciate some input from local Bedford epidemiology community and some guidance, my preference would be to not take that. And I have no love for the CDC, believe me. And Mike, I know you know that. But I think on an increasing basis, people are saying, get more kids back into schools sooner. That is what is becoming sort of the prevalent outcry. And so while I might not, absent some of the things we just discussed, be able to support the plan, if we were to support it, and I'm not sure about this infection rate dashboard at DHHS. You mentioned constituent factors. I don't quite understand what that is. But leaving those sort of caveats aside, I would say that if we could put something in writing that said, you know, we're going to review this every 2 weeks based on the following 1 or 2 metrics, or 3 or 4, whatever the administration decides based on experts and whatnot. If you put that in writing and you commit to it in writing, and you tell the community actively, then I would be much more inclined to support this. It's not that I don't trust you, Mike. You know I do.
I understand.
It's not that I don't trust you, Bob. You know I do. We don't know each other that well, but I would like to think that you know I have enough respect for what you tell me to trust it. But what I'm nervous about is that the process will get in the way of action. And I've seen it happen time and time again. My experience is private sector, but I've seen it in private sector, public sector. And so I would need a commitment from the administration that here's how we're going to go forward to check and see that we're in a good place. And here's the timing on what we would need to push more kids into the school. Because again, 50% and under the current program, and I know you guys have worked your brains out, you've worked like crazy to get to where we are. I just have trouble supporting it without something telling me, committing in writing that this is where we're going to get if the following indicators and or metrics are met. I'll shut up.
No, thank you. The other piece that I failed to mention, John, was that all 6 of our school nurses, or 7 actually, participate in every Friday, they have a conference call with Dr. Benjamin Chan, and part of the conversation has to do with how do the schools handle symptoms when they come into the offices, what information gets sent up to DHHS, and part of those conversations too are what guidance, if any, will the state provide schools with respect to the very metrics that we're discussing. And so I think you're exactly right. We need those metrics. I think the devil's going to be in the details because people will have opinions about what metrics are acceptable and what are not. And so we're going to have to work on those and get some good information.
Right, and it's very clear that I'm a proponent now of getting more in sooner or starting out fully enrolled and then backing off if we need to. If anybody wants to see that in a more articulate way, you can go to Bishop Girton's website. Their principal has posted their plan, which I think is looking at. But I also believe we need a mechanism to go the other way. So if we get 2 or 3 cases pop up that are bad, we get a couple of hospitalizations, which we haven't had. We've had 0 in that age group as published by the state. But if we do go in the wrong direction in Bedford or as a state, and the state changes its recommendation, we're going to need this plan to say how we disengage. How do we keep our kids even safer? Maybe we have to go to 100% remote. So I'm not unaware that the other side of the coin could get flipped.
I understand. Thank you.
If you don't mind, so I think that how and when this plan would change is I agree with John, it is mission critical to the whole thing. And I kind of hear that John's asking, so let me see if I'm getting this right. You and your team are putting together the metrics and the frequency of, I'll call it sampling, don't take that as a scientist, right? The frequency, the plan you have to review metrics that are related to the transmission of the virus in our community. Generally, you're working on that.
Correct.
Okay, and you intend to complete that function. You're going to do that work, right?
That is my next task,
right.
Yes.
Okay, so I hear a commitment to have that done, right? Now the next question is going to be how much of a debate is the open community going to have on those numbers? Probably not very much, right? But is that enough, John? I mean, is that an answer to your question of that helps at least? I'm not asking you to say yes or no, but at least did we close the gap here in that conversation with you?
Well, it's encouraging that this work, the process is ongoing behind the scenes. Yeah, but it's sort of like taking an exam in college and your professor says, well, when you're done with the exam, you get a good grade, you'll pass the course with a B+, which is what you need, but you still have to do the lab work behind the scenes. But if you don't do it, you know inside that you're still going to get that 86 that meets the grade that.
I'm not sure I follow the analogy, but I guess my question is, did you hear that Mike is going to do that? I'm not asking if it's sufficient, but
I heard that there are things under consideration in that direction, if that's a fair answer.
Yep, that's fair.
So just to let you know, it's part of the construct of the plan is that it's nimble so that we can expand and contract. And by not having those metrics makes the plan not nimble. And so we need to have those. So I have to have that in order to move forward.
And how long do you think it's going to
page? Metrics.
How long do you think it's going to take to get you? When will you have your
initially in my first conversations with the people I was talking to, I had hoped to have it done by August 10th. I'm not guaranteeing August 10th.
No.
I said I had hoped to have it done by August 10th.
Thank you. Yep, Cindy, go ahead. Yep.
A different trend. I was very impressed, Bob, with what you handed us this evening, and with the high school plans. One of the biggest concept that people are concerned with is that the remote part in the afternoons will be kind of like it was last spring. But it seems as if, and you say you have 84 teachers working very diligently on exactly how they can make this each course, because you've listed all the different types of courses and exactly what they're going to have to do to make it a really worthwhile experience and to really make sure that these kids are getting almost the same education they would with a little small amount of time at home and the other time with their teacher remotely. Could you explain, how is this going about? How are you really going to make it be workable when they're there and then they're over here and then, what's happening there?
Cindy's referencing a document that Tom's going to share. It's a Google Doc.
Okay.
And that way you'll be able to see the same thing that the board saw.
Okay, so to get to that later? Or?
No, I'm going to do it right now.
Cool.
In Tom, it's the first one, letter A. Still warming up. It's warming up there. It's getting there.
I think that's people's concerns, is so many of the students sloughed off, didn't really put full effort into it last spring, and people are very afraid that would happen again, and it doesn't look like it will. I want to know more.
Yep. So I'm just going to zip through those bullets and then maybe elaborate on some of them. But that first bullet, synchronous, which are live tools, are going to be used in every block in those remote instruction times. And students will see and speak to their teacher just like ordinary class. We did not do that in the spring. The spring was a sort of an emergency jump in. Second bullet, the synchronous tool that we'll use is Google Meet and hopefully Google Meet Enhancement Suite. Holly Doe, the tech director, has been talking about getting that sort of add-on to Google Meet. There's some just small changes that make that Google Meet more like class. So in class, these guys know there's a lot of group work that happens. And the Enhancement Suite allows a teacher to take that Google Meet and quickly break up into groups where 3, 4 students can go off into their own Meet and a teacher can jump in and work with them and then move out and move into another small group. That little change will mimic what happens in the classrooms, and so we're hopeful that we'll be able to use that tool as a synchronous tool during remote instruction. I mentioned the next bullet. In the spring, we were unprepared for remote learning, and now we're planning for it. So currently teachers are just getting into, Tom can speak more to this, but getting into the planning. Every principal has teachers doing this, Cindy. It's not just the high school. In the current work that started today, that's the list. So Tom, if you want to just scroll down, you can just see there's a bunch of teachers who are available starting today, and they're just diving in on doing any one of those things or multiple things that deal with getting assessments ready for the hybrid model, updating the Q1 scope and sequence to make it fit the hybrid model better. There's just a lot going on there. And as Cindy pointed out, there's 84 teachers currently working on that for the high school. And each principal has their own groups that are doing the same thing.
This piece of paper that you gave us, you've got it here. We'll attach it to the minutes. You can maybe distribute it somehow tomorrow, so people can kind of get it. Did that answer your question, Cindy, or?
Yeah, it kind of was impressive to me, and I wanted the people out there to see what the work that was going into it, that it would not be what it was last spring. And I'm just fascinated with the technology, so the teacher can when the kids are at home, they can break them into groups of 3 or 4 to work together on a project. The modern age that I don't understand. Sounds good.
Cindy, you and John are beating me to my questions, right? That's a good question. John beat me to one, and you beat me to the other one. I'd like to ask you, Bob, or Mike, while I have the opportunity here as well, to follow up on Cindy, which is part of I have had a difficult time in connecting with parents and answering the question because I don't know the answer. Is around the academic suitability of some of the remote learning options. And the very direct question is, why can't kids at home just watch videos of classes, a live video stream of classes in the classes that are being physically attended at BHS, right? And I can't answer that question. Can you?
Yes, I can. The big difference is lecture is such a small part of what teachers do. And Tom, you can scroll to that. It's very simple, right? We don't lecture to these guys very often anymore. And if a camera on me, I can lecture to students at home, but that's just not how students are wired to learn nowadays. When I talk to the board about Generation Z and trying to figure out how they learn best, they're just growing up in a different age technologically where their brains are just sort of hardwired to learn in a different way than you and I did, right? And so the first thing is if I just put a camera in the classroom, they may be at home, but they're going to see the teacher talking to one student here or students in groups working, and it's going to be meaningless to the people at home. Second to that, one of the complaints we had in the spring was how much screen time students had. And so I can't imagine putting a 14 to 18-year-old in front of a screen at home for 5 hours, watching their peers do something on the other side. I will just lose people quickly. They're just not wired to do that. Any team, really. There's a few who are can do that, but not many.
What about the percent of students that will actually be remote this next year? They're going to be doing that day in, day out.
Well, they aren't, because the remote instruction portion of the day is going to be, well, you saw the list. Teachers are changing how they're going to instruct because you don't have someone in front of you live. They're through a screen. So you just have to change your methodology to get after the same lesson objective. And so that's why they're working on assessments in the curriculum and changing scope and sequence so it can make sense when you present something to a screen as opposed to being in class live with them. So those students who are fully remote will have the benefit of those afternoon remote sessions. The live piece, yes, they're gonna miss that, and we have to replace that somehow. That is true.
If you base their school year on hours in front of whatever, the person delivering the information, and they're not going to be doing the 5.5 hours that somebody in full-time school would be doing, how does that math work out, that these kids are actually going to complete a year's worth of schooling in a year?
Yeah, they're not. Someone said it up here. There's a sacrifice to having the pandemic going on. Absolutely. None of us are going to get through the curriculum that we normally would in a given year. That is true. And I said that last time. I cannot promise that I'm going to get students through the entire curriculum in an ordinary way. That's why teachers have to pick out the essentials in the curriculum. How are we going to do this? What are the labs that have the most leverage for what students need to learn and the skills and the content? And there's no way, Bill, that they're going to learn the same thing. That is just hands down the truth when I can only bring half my kids into the class at a time because of social distancing. There's just no way to get after the full curriculum. That's just how it is.
In our conversations, I've gone back and forth, and I can't believe that's true. I resist that thinking because the obligation we have to these kids is to give them at least a full year's of education that the taxpayers are paying for, and the students are working toward.
Then you need to extend the school year and the school day and pay for that stuff, and then we can do it. That is true.
Well,
in the limits
or as we approach statistical infection zero, that we can actually drive towards more full open school.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and I'm there, believe me. I want to be in school just as much as everyone. This is not what I signed up for, right? It just isn't, we know that. I'm there, Bill.
Some of the comments that we get from, come on the online, is how the IEPs and the 504, and all these type of programs, how is that going to be handled in this hybrid model to get the services that are, mandated by their plans?
To that, let me answer that. So so there were some successes in remote learning in the spring, and there were some failures. One of the areas that we really struggled with is providing services to students on IEPs and 504 plans in a fully remote model. This model is not fully remote. This model is in-person and remote. However, every student with an IEP is required to have an IEP meeting with their full team prior to September 30th. And so I'll give you an example. So we have a speech pathologist here tonight, Mrs. Bemis. I've known her for almost 20 years. So when she sits around, assuming she sits around a team meeting with a student, she will make a recommendation. If she knows that that student is in school 2 days a week, she may say, Michael needs 3 sessions of speech a week. I need to see him twice in person, and I can do 1 session remotely. Or she may say, all 3 need to be in person. And that team will make a recommendation as to what that child needs. Additionally, there may be some students whose learning differences are significant enough that they will be required to be in school 5 days a week because of how their plan. And so each one of those is going to be taken on an individual case-by-case basis. There's not a one-size-fits-all for that population.
John, you had a question?
Yeah, and my answer is going to be a little jumbled, but to Bob's point, that was my whole sort of prior 3 or 4 minutes that I took, which is, how can I support a plan that doesn't outline in writing, or my preference, flesh out in detail, a commitment to get us from where you're suggesting we want to be right now, we being what we're asked to vote on, to where I want us to be, and I think where everybody wants us to be. And we can disagree and quibble about some of the things along the way, but August 10th was thrown out there. We don't have to wait till August 10th to come up with a method of making darn sure that everything is being done test-wise, maybe scaling back on social distancing if our friends at CDC and whatnot say that 6 feet is not required, what have you. We don't have to, there are many steps that can happen between now and August 10th, and I know it doesn't seem like much time, but it's 2 weeks, granted it's in the summer, but I need a commitment that we are prepared to full-blown go back to full enrollment, everybody at school, as soon as we get to fill-in-the-blank metrics. We don't have to take the state metrics. We can make up our own metrics, and we can follow our own metrics. So that's my point is, I have trouble committing to something that's got this sort of open-ended, we'll get there. Okay, trust us, we'll get there.
If I can argue about that, there's going to be some portion of the population that won't want to come back until there's absolutely no risk, because they or their family members are going to be severely impacted. So we're left with some portion of kids that may not come back for quite some time, or even desert the district.
And that element.
So what I'm trying to say is that part of the plan can't be decided, because you can't possibly know those numbers until they occur.
We just keep the residual part of the plan in place that would have been in place all along.
For the remote fraction of students that are going to be going in remote.
I would suggest that we do that right now, but there's another argument that says otherwise. But I agree with you. Yeah? I recognize that.
But I'm missing the disagreement between you and Bob.
There really isn't. We
Okay.
come to the end of the road at the same place.
Okay.
What he's saying is that there will be a residual part of the population, parents, students, that do not want to go back to school, even if we go full back to school.
Yeah.
And I'm suggesting that if we've got this hybrid in place, they can remain within the hybrid model. They don't have to go back to school if they don't feel comfortable or safe. I think if I've got your...
How would that be handled, Mike? How would that be handled if let's say, New Hampshire stays the anomaly of the country and doesn't have increasing numbers and children dying as they are in Florida and Texas now and of COVID? What if we manage to break the chain somehow and we all go back? What happens to the remote? Are we going to have teachers assigned just to do remote or what?
So there, at some point, and the principals might be able to help me out with this, but at some point, we will be able to continue to absorb bringing kids in more and more and more, but there will come a breaking point whereby we will need to stop offering a fully remote model, or we will need to hire more teachers.
Hire some extra faculty,
Simply
just be
because-
the remote teachers.
Right, it depends. So, you know, it's going to depend on, it will depend upon the numbers. I mean, I won't go into specific details, but staffing is a big part of any of these equations. And so we're being very creative with staffing as we stand right now, but that's just the reality. The more kids we bring back, that means the fewer teachers we can assign to remote. And at some juncture, if we bring a vast majority of kids back, that means we may need to say there is no more fully remote option available, and VLAX may be the option.
You know, and we, in this district, let me just one more thing. In this district, I don't know if people understand, we are building challenged by size. You know, if any of you been to Souhegan in Amherst, they put a big addition on 15 more years ago, and they are really underutilizing their space. They have several hundred student capacity that's not being filled. Places like that, it's a little easier to distance. Derry has been debating for the last several years whether they should close one of the elementary schools because their population has decreased so much. I think somebody said Bedford's been losing so many students in the last several years, not that we're aware of. And so none of our schools have lots of extra capacity, as lots of towns do, to spread the people out just to begin with and get that social distancing and put more and more kids in the school. Of those of you that have been here, like Bill, since the beginning, you know that we built this building with we said there was going to be a main structure of the gym and all those facilities were 1,500, but we were building capacity for the classrooms for about 1,300. Each of the building ends were built so that we could easily extend the plumbing and the electrical and all that when we built the expansion to build the building to expand to 1,500. We're 1,500 now. So we have to understand the reality of Bedford. We're a little challenged with just the size and the capacities and things like that. Most of our elementary schools are full and the others, and they're not. They don't have a lot of empty classrooms waiting for social
So I want to
distancing.
follow up with Mike on the staffing question, but Sue, you're down at the end. I don't want to miss you. Do you have any?
I know it's in this document, but one question that I had asked Bob about that I was hoping he could just kind of share is Wednesdays, what they look like. Wednesdays, what they look like now, and if there's any flexibility in the Wednesday schedule.
Change the schedule up,
Correct.
remove Wednesday and Sunday.
Yes, correct. If you can just kind of tell us what, I know it's loosely defined, if you could maybe give us any further information on how you envision Wednesdays to look.
Yeah. So currently, Wednesdays are going to include the courses that need a little more time with teachers, the students who need a little more time with teachers due to the program or the course or the students that are in those classes. And so I think I have 9 courses, maybe 10 courses that are the AB model, which are typically courses where the student is with the teacher almost twice the amount of time just by the nature of the learner and the content. And so those students will come in on Wednesdays and just get that extra time with their teachers. And then also I have 90-something AP and IB courses that have exams and some content that they have to cover in order to be prepared for May. So currently Wednesdays would allow those students in those classes to have time with their teachers, essentially a red Wednesday and a silver Wednesday. So it wouldn't be a lot more time, but those Wednesdays would flip-flop and allow both of those types of courses, AP, IB, and the AB type courses, to just get more face time with teachers. Wednesdays are also used for one-to-one and small group stuff with teachers and students that aren't in those classes, because we did learn in the spring that the remote instruction model can be tough on students, and they just need some check-ins with their teachers. My team recommended that we keep that piece of Wednesday alive for now until we live this a little bit, so that we can not lose students on the way. Because we're going in for the long haul right now, maybe, right? We could be for the long haul, and so if we couldn't get back to full by January, that's a lot of time in remote instruction that students have to go through. And I don't want them to tune out and just drop out of those classes. And so we're keeping that Wednesday in there for now, because teachers can check in with students and students can check in with teachers, just to make sure everyone's keeping up with what we need them to keep up with. However, in a month from now, if we're chugging along and the ideas behind the Wednesday schedule can come out, and we'll check in with teachers and students, and if students feel like they can let that piece go, they don't need all those check-ins, we can probably just take that Wednesday schedule out and condense all those other days. And so the Wednesday schedule that I just described would be removed, and we would just condense all those other days. So R1 would be a Monday, S1 would be a Tuesday, and then we would just go right into R2 and S2. So we would just condense the schedule as it is now by taking out those Wednesdays, which would get us through curriculum a little quicker, and it would also allow those students who are in the AP, IB, and AB classes to see their teachers a little more frequently, but not as frequently as that Wednesday schedule. I know that's very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, but it would be a way. I want to test it first to make sure we're meeting all student needs. And if we are, and we don't need the Wednesday model, it can come out and we can move a little faster through the pace and scope and sequence of courses.
Those be in person, so would it basically be like what Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday look like? And Wednesday would just be a block for A through K's to come in, and then L through Z's to come in after that?
If we took that Wednesday out, it would be the same thing. It would be in-person classes in the morning, AK, LZ, and then the remote in the afternoon. Correct.
Are you okay on that, Sue?
Yes.
So just to follow back up on the staffing, that one of my questions is, what are the financial implications of this plan that we have not yet heard about or seen? What are the additional financial implications of the additional staffing that we may or may not need? You know, what are your estimate bands? Where are we? What are the categories of funds that we would need? I'm not asking for dollars and cents unless you have them, but.
Right, so currently there's three major areas that come to mind, and Lisa might be able to help me with this. So number one is going to be transportation. There's going to be some additional costs with respect to transportation at the high school level. And so I don't have exact numbers because those costs are still being negotiated. But are you ready to talk anything with the numbers yet, or are we still too early?
Still too early.
Still too early for that. So that's number one. Number two, I do expect us to see some special education costs coming out, particularly in consultative services and needing to send consultants into students' homes, those students who are too medically fragile to come into the school building at all. And so Kathy McKechnie has currently been working on that and will likely continue. That's the second one. And then lastly, and these are costs that we're trying to avoid altogether, but we might need to incur, and that is when we have certain classes that we can't offer simultaneously, remotely, and in person, and we might need to pay a staff member to teach an additional section. And so those are additional costs that we may be looking at. But those, right now, the principals are at a place where They are looking at all of their staffing, looking at their courses, and putting their schedules into place, and we'll know more about that in the coming weeks.
Do you have any rough order of magnitude?
Lisa?
No, because part of that is to see who's returning in the fall. We've had a change in staff, so I'm monitoring right now the contracts that have gone out to see what some of the changes are, based on where we budgeted for certain positions, and someone might have left and we've replaced someone else, so we've had some attrition, we've had some changes. So I'm just looking at the people we have on board now, and once the schedule is all put in place, that is one of the variables, how many sections someone might have to pick up or not.
Yep. So are we talking $1 million or 10 million, like rough order magnitude? What's a teacher? What's one extra teacher section cost a year or a half a year, a semester?
I'm just trying to think.
It's just hard to estimate. I mean, maybe this is a fair statement. I am not concerned that our costs would be close to exceeding what we have typically seen in a year-end fund balance. So I am not thinking $1 million. I'm thinking maybe $200,000, $300,000. But I am estimating.
Yep, go ahead, Cindy.
We've spent so much time talking about the high school, then all of a sudden when you're talking about the remote, how will that be handled with the K through 8? Are we going to have like depending on the numbers, are we going to have like a first grade remote teacher and a second grade remote teacher that handles, because, as we all know, the elementary schools are just as hands-on and not teachers standing up there talking, even probably as much or more than the high school. So if we're going to have like maybe, a teacher that will be basically doing the first grade curriculum, second grade for the remote students, or how's that going to handle?
So that's a great question. So our plan is tomorrow, principals will be sending a letter electronically to all families who are registered in their schools, asking them to essentially sort of register for the hybrid model and get a sense of who is requesting the remote only. I want to make it clear that all of the provisions and layered protections we've put in place make it safe for every student to come to school except for the most significantly medically fragile. We believe we can meet the needs of every student in this model with a very, very small exception. So in the event that we have those numbers, yes, elementary principals will be assigning teachers, and in some cases, some teachers will be volunteering to teach those remote classes.
Costs, do we have any increases expected for custodial with the amount of additional cleaning and things that were needed? Do we need additional custodial staff?
Right now, I don't see any additional costs with custodial. Right now, we're well in the black because we have 5 positions that are yet unfilled. We are still trying to find those positions. If costs come with custodial, it'll be probably with cleaning supplies. But right now, the state is providing a good number of PPE. And I think I also shared with the board, the Bedford Sewing Battalion is providing almost 5,500 masks for every student and teacher in the district. Is there more to the custodial piece, Lisa?
Is the real issue in that area, and we are short-staffed right now. But I know in the budget, we had planned for some overtime and some other supports, substitutes. So I feel that even if we had to add additional staff, we could absorb it in that. Because the workers we have will only absorb or only cost so much of the overtime.
No, understood. On the PPP front, I really appreciate the donations of the personal protection stuff. That said, as a school board member, I don't want to rely upon donations to protect our teachers and our staff. So can you just nod your head and assure me that that we are sourcing and appropriately sourcing PPE so that we don't have to rely upon donations?
Yes, by the end of the week, I will have an RFP out there. I have a number of vendors that have contacted me, and I will be sending our requests to those vendors and looking for the best price. Actually, and also make sure they have the resources, because a lot are saying they can source it, but I need to be able to have that assurance.
And I'm quite sure that your group is very careful with the PPE, that we don't have any of the hand sanitizers that are on the bad list right now, that we will only be using safe products for our students, sure.
Correct.
Okay, do we have, so we've gone through some questions. Are there any, Bill, do you have anything else?
I've got a little soliloquy, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, first I want to apologize for last week's fiasco and the indulgence of the chair trying to get a hold of me in a place that apparently I couldn't be gotten a hold of. Also, my friends at BCTV for really trying their best to, I'm sorry, trying their best to try and make that contact work. I couldn't hear the meeting at all. Apparently you could hear me coughing and moving around and stuff. Sorry about that. Anyway, when the plan was, the first shape of the plan was coming out, I wasn't particularly amused by it. And I'm thinking that 3 weeks later, with the CDC telling us that they want us to come back to school full-time, full bore, and New Hampshire approaching statistical zero infection rate, I'm thinking that what we should be doing is a lot more looking like full open with adjustments for hybrid and remote for the people that need it. And even in the span of the last 3 weeks when this plan was crafted, things have changed that much that the CDC had come out and said that we should be full open. I resist that a lot, but I also know that there's a lot of people here that would very much like to have their kids go full-time 5 days. And not because I'm trying to do this politically, I'm just trying to say that I think we have that capability, and I think we should be working towards that right now. At the same time, I know there's also a fraction that would prefer a hybrid model, and they're the professionals. We're just the amateurs up here sitting on the board, but I think we have an obligation to the students to provide them with the sort of speed and attention that would come with being in class every day, whether they're in class or remote. And while Principal Jazokis notes that we can't teach the Generation Z kids like the way we were taught, I have to disagree because people adapt. And if the situation relies on us adapting to an old style form of somebody standing up in front of them, educating them, because that's the kind of speed that we have to move the kids along at, then I'd be all for that model. So if it was up to me, I would have the model look like whatever percentage want to go 5 days. We have a regular 5-day schedule, red, silver, 5 days a week, none of this Wednesday special stuff. The percentage that want to go remote or hybrid rather, come in, split 50-50, and the people that have to be remote are remote. So I've told my colleagues what my feelings are on this, and it really hasn't changed. I'm a hard no on the plan, even though we haven't brought it to a motion yet. And it's not because I disrespect the administration for the work they've done. It's just that I expect better, not only from them, but for the students. And I may be only the one vote that feels that way, but we're the ones that have to make the call, and that's the way that I'm looking at it. I'm not sure I have much support, but
well, how do we close the gap between where you are and where the district is advising us?
Go 5 days.
That's not closing the gap. That's going with you 100%.
What's wrong with that? No. I'm being flip, but
you got elected to vote. Yeah.
I'm not trying to be flip, but I'm serious that as the state moves towards asymptotic 0% infection rate, to think that we're going to feather ourselves along until what, the end of October, end of September before we do a review and make a change. And the reality is that if we see an outbreak here in the school, bang, we're snapped back to 100% remote anyway. So to think that we're going to like tiptoe between the infections and not run the school as a part-time operation, I don't like that the way that looks even. So again, that's just my opinion on it. There's 4 other votes that have to make the call.
Where do you get the 0% when there's 57 new cases just a few days ago?
There's 1.3 million people living in New Hampshire.
Yeah, but it's still, but Bedford, and
the largest percentage of the cases, as Fred Vermonti's article in the Union Leader said today, is in Hillsborough County. We are the hot spot. I mean,
Yeah, and
Hillsborough
then
County,
long-term healthcare
I know,
facilities.
Rockingham County, all those that, we're the area. We've had, Amherst has had 31 cases total. Hollis had 10. Brookline had 11. We've had 307. I know we have long-term care facilities, but we just have to be aware that it's not zero. And like I say, we're not Florida, we're not Texas, we're not California, but they opened rapidly. Sununu, to me, has been so smart and has made this state do it very gently, the reopening. And like, was it Mike, I think, said that there's nothing in Bedford that's opened 100% yet, the restaurants or whatever.
I'm not
And
advocating for 100%.
slowly.
I'm not advocating for 100%. I'm advocating for the percent that can tolerate going full-time, and then having the facility allow for that kind of option. Right now, it's not allowed.
I don't think we have the staff that can do a full-time, a hybrid, and a remote.
That circles around to me saying that Principal Jazoka is telling us that the kids can't learn like that. I disagree. People adapt.
I've seen all the educational, things that he's read and all this other kind of stuff. Not that I haven't, I have grandchildren that are not in class anymore, in schools anymore. But no, someone standing up and lecturing, they have found that is almost the least way to retain knowledge. And our kids nowadays are learning in new and innovative ways that they're retaining the knowledge so much longer. And all this,
We had this discussion when we talked about a geometry textbook, and I said, why do we need a new one? Because Euclid hasn't changed in 2,400 years. So to argue that we can't teach the kids in a way that
to watch a lecture on
not so much even a lecture, come up with different and innovative ways to teach them with the methods that we have available. I'm trying to advocate as hard as I can to do something different. And I'm thinking that the plan that we have 3 weeks old is now become fairly ossified, that it's time to I don't always say throw it out, but certainly look at it again and maybe come back and come up with something else that's a little more, looks like a more open school than it is to rely on what we looked like 3 weeks ago and the terror that came with it.
Not that it matters, but I know that a lot of the districts in the state, or some of the districts in the state who were originally looking at, let's get to, they're moving back to the hybrid, that Bedford's plan, they had tonight on the news again, two of them, Merrimack Valley and a lot of the others that have said hybrid or remote only.
And we have to kind of go through the steps here, and I think we're going through the steps. Just that my opinion seems to be different than what the administration wants to do.
Well, I don't think it's wholly different. I would say what I'm hearing you, and I don't know if you're hearing it too, Mike, is that we're all in this big hole without an analysis, without the baseline analysis of when and where the plan will change and where these population transmission dynamics come to play in this hybrid plan. Right? So this is a good starting point. But without these population dynamics that you and your team are going to use in order to decide when we can bring more teachers in and when we can bring more students in, like we're all in this deep hole until those become
more concrete.
Right? That's the part of
absolutely.
That's the part where we agree. Right?
So, Mike, if I can ask a question, you're talking about sending out something on Power School to have kids verify in elementary grades.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Where the kids in elementary are going to select for remote or hybrid?
Hybrid or remote.
They're just going to get a survey.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not going to be something you're going to hold them to. I mean, so if little Johnny says, I got to be remote, and little Sally says, I can do remote or hybrid, they don't get a choice. They're going to make a choice.
Yeah, we're asking families for planning purposes to assume a semester,
right?
Even though we're committed to looking at the data with more frequency than that. But if you go into it, plan for a semester.
If John says, how fast?
Well, I understand that. I understand that.
But week by week, or every 2 weeks, once a month?
Well, again, I am meeting with people to discuss this very issue, but what I have heard consistently since March is they look for trends over a 14-day period.
Right.
So I would expect that we would do the same. Okay. That doesn't mean we wouldn't look every day or look over the week, and definitely we would look at the data in our own schools. I too have thought a lot about this.
I'm sure you have.
Because
please don't say that I'm disparaging you or your efforts.
No. I don't feel that way at all. Okay. I actually think we have more common ground than not. My sense of the difference is this, and tell me if I'm wrong. my sense is everybody wants to swim in the deep end of the pool, right? Some people want to jump in the deep end of the pool, and if somebody's starting to go under, then we go to the shallow end. I am much more comfortable with 4,500 kids and 800 employees starting in the shallow end, making sure we're safe, and then going to the deep end. That's the real difference, even though everybody wants to get to the deep end.
I'd like to make a comment on the analogy. What you're suggesting is that we go back to a year. Your analogy suggests that we're going back a year ago. So we're all going to jump in and we're all going in the deep end. Cindy, I'm allowed to have my opinion on this. And I would suggest that we have the 3 pillars, which have been quoted time and time and time again. I think everybody in Bedford going forward can, you know, if they're given a test 5 years from now, they'll know what the 3 pillars are.
Right.
But I would suggest that we have the lifeguards that can look to see if there's someone struggling, that look to see if something isn't working, whether it's a health issue or whether it's an academic issue. We can make those changes on the fly. And again, Jay asked Bill, what would get you a little bit closer to the hybrid model, I think, if I modify his question a little bit. I'm there. I'm willing to make a commitment to that plan if the same commitment is there to meet me halfway. I didn't hear one word that told me that we're willing to put a timeline on it, a number of dates, a number of metrics, a number of X, Y, and Z that we haven't even thought or talked about. If that commitment's not going to be made to me and the parents and students of Bedford, how is it then that I can trust that we're going to get there as soon as we can? And I haven't heard an answer to that question.
I thought you answered that you said that by August 10th you would have the answer of what the metrics and all that was going to be, and then you're talking about a 14-day constant look that would be even less than 14. That's what he just said, isn't it? Isn't that what you just said, Mike? He answered your questions.
Some of what he said was state-driven, and well, I didn't hear a commitment to writing.
Part of the issue is the plan hasn't been developed, and so once it's developed, it'll be committed to writing. But
okay,
I'm wondering what it's going to look like in 14 days. What things are going to look like health-wise. If we're going to be in a much better place or a far worse place.
I agree.
So does this plan address that variability?
I don't know. You know, things always go down. I'm from West Virginia, and I was supposed to be there this week, visiting my sister and my mother that just went into limited care. West Virginia was was the last state to have COVID, if you remember, cases. And they were cruising along and doing really, really well and everything. And all of a sudden, in the last month, it's just blown up. You know, various reasons. They had, a lot of people went to Myrtle Beach for vacation, other things, but whatever. So all of a sudden, the nursing homes are all closed down. Everything's closed. They've changed all their, working on all their school plans to alter them. I mean, it's not like everything's going to just go away. And so I love the fact that you have these metrics. You're going to work on it, and we're going to be smart, but we're going to follow the science and not just public perception of something or other, or we're going to follow the science. And if the science says we can reopen fully, check it every 2 weeks, we will move to reopening. I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
CDC recommends it now.
Yeah, but I'm curious, I didn't read this article. When they talk, one thing that I'd read from another source, it said that when they talk about the safety of the children, they said children are safer in school, not safer from COVID, but safer from because child abuse cases are not being reported now. Safer because the gap of the economically advantaged and disadvantaged is growing because so many of the poor kids don't have the same access to the parents that are willing to help them. And that's what they were saying, children were safer in school. Not that they're safer from COVID. I don't think anybody thinks that we're safer when we put all these hundreds and hundreds of people in a building together.
CDC.
Yeah, but
safer bringing them all back versus.
But why? Why
with
are they
social
safer in school?
distancing?
The article, then we'll have it
Is there with social distancing? I was under the.
With social distancing. Yeah,
So with social distancing at 6 feet, it's already been proven that we cannot come back full. I mean, anybody that's ever been in the BHS hallways knows during managed time, there's kids sitting on the floor in Bulldog Corner during changing in between classes. It is, I mean, it is wall-to-wall students.
But it's not supposed to be under the new cleaning and social distancing regime.
Well, exactly. That's why we need to be at the plan that Bob has proposed. I mean, there's no way to put, that's what I'm saying is, if you're going to respect social distancing, there's no way at any of the schools you can be back.
I'm not saying full open as in throw the masks off, everybody's, back to normal. I'm talking about social distancing and the required cleaning protocols that are supposed to be in place.
But with social distancing, you can't put any more kids in the building than what we're already putting.
50%.
Which is what we're putting.
Yeah, well, now we're doing it, but we're only doing it for an hour and a half a day.
At the high school,
Yeah.
but the reason why we're doing that at the high school is in Bob's video, he addressed the fact that the reason why he did not propose this AB plan is because if you go to an AB plan where half the kids are in on Monday, the other half are in on Tuesday, et cetera, that takes a 4-week curriculum and extends it into, a 2-week curriculum and extends it into 4 weeks. So if we want to go that route, we can go that route, but now we've sacrificed curriculum. So I actually respect the fact that Bob has acknowledged
my
that.
problem with their lack of faith in remote learning, that they can only learn by the Generation Z standard, and they can't learn any other way. That we can't expect our administration and teachers to come up with useful means that a class can be taught in one unit, even if people are home and people are in class. That's the part I struggle with the most, and despite the professionals' opinion that they can't do it like that, I'm saying that make it happen. I mean, we're talking about kids coming out with half a school year as an outcome if we don't make some sort of strong effort to try and get these kids to move along at a pace that resembles normal. Half is not normal, and having the kids in school for a grand total of 90 minutes a day or whatever that total is on a rotating basis is not part of the punch, feeding the bulldog.
But the hours that, the time they're in the building.
They include hours that are mostly
the time that they're in the building is not their total school time. And that's what, I was impressed with in the video and looking at all the little circles, is that, and they're going to make lab things that can be done at home and all this type of thing. And so they're going to try to extend the day for the kids, that you have this amount of time so that you're face-to-face with the teacher, and then you're face-to-face on the thing.
I watched the video
you watched
multiple times. I can almost...
And it didn't...
We do it with Bob. It's like the follow the bouncing ball.
But it didn't seem like half time. It sounded like they were going to get a really...
It's not what would otherwise be
Bob's
considered
right
a
here.
Bedford High School.
We could ask him.
Yeah, Bob.
I need to explain him.
I'm just saying, it's not what we would have considered to be a Bedford High education. And I think that shapes the kids.
The teachers standing up lecturing is nothing like we consider Bedford High education right now. And it's all these brain studies that they have found how much more effective the learning is when the students are actively involved in the discussions and in the research.
This is the same argument I had about AP versus IB. AP, you're drinking from the fire hose. Now everybody gets to drink from the fire hose.
Okay, so we're not going to resolve, since that's an old argument, bring Bob back new, we're not going to resolve that here. So the one that I still think that there's a significant disconnect here is John, your understanding of how Mike is going to handle
how can we reopen fully?
The baseline public health metrics that would either lead us to adding kids to schools or taking kids away from schools. And I don't think it's fair to ask him what the numbers are today, because he said he doesn't have them. But I'm going to let him.
I wouldn't understand them if he did.
But you're talking about a commitment, right?
I am talking about a verbal and written commitment so that we can't just sort of all breathe a sigh of relief, say, what a good boy am I, or girl, I apologize.
No, that's fine. So let's let Mike answer like what he's, again, so he can, in his own words, he can say again what he's proposing to do for us.
The only way to provide a metric is to write it down and show it to people. And so I have made a draft and I have shared it with the two volunteer infectious disease doctors that I'm working with to start looking at what are the most important metrics. However, the conversation can't just be with myself and two physicians. I need to involve school nurses. I need to involve some of our teaching staff. I need to involve some community members to have this dialogue. And frankly, I need to involve some other superintendents to get a sense of what some other districts may or may not be thinking, so I have a well-rounded thought process on how to put this together. One of the challenges of this is that none of us have ever done this before. We didn't go to school to learn how to teach a pandemic, and so my commitment to you is that I'm going to get it. It has to be written down, otherwise it doesn't exist, and it will be presented front and center on the website for the world to see.
Is that what you're looking for or no?
Yeah.
Well, I am looking for a little more, and I don't want to drag this out as an evening, but I come back to the gentleman who has 30 years of military experience. I'm trying to sort of create another option because people have asked for more than one option, and people I'm at the front of the line there. And we don't have to fill in the numbers for another metric at the top of my page. But we do have to commit to, here's what the state is considering. So there may be 5, one may be an add, one may be a drop, but we are committed to working with the state and the relevant organizations with guidance from the CDC, et cetera, to flesh out a plan, which is not currently in place, so that we can get back to, here's where I come back to. I want to be able to tell the parents of Bedford that if the numbers to be determined are in line with what we consider to be safe, upholding the pillars and the CDC and whatnot, we can turn on a dime to be defined, time period, and get our kids back to school in essentially a model that is as close to where we were a year ago, back before bad stuff happened. We can get them back now.
But I hear what you say, and I think I heard Mike saying exactly the same thing, and he said yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they're but if you're not hearing yes, I want you to, I can't say it for him. Are you here? So did you hear yes or no? Are you saying yes, Mike?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, he's
because
gonna
I
do
hear
it.
a sort of a loosey-goosey construct that may come into play. I'm not hearing a firm, and it may just because they haven't worked on this yet.
I think in 2 weeks, things are going to look different anyway.
Yeah, and he's
So to
working
have
on
him
it.
try and nail it.
But
No, but that's where, so Bill, this is an important point. It's been important to me for a long time. I don't think what the actual health, the public health situation is in 2 weeks matters to the yardstick you're going to use to measure it. And what we don't have here is a yardstick to measure where we're going to actually mesh the education plan with the health plan. We admit it doesn't exist here. I think it's a big hole. But he's saying they've got this half that they based on guidelines that restricted some of our physical abilities in our school, and now they're going to mesh in this half. They have to do this half. But I don't know if this half matters to what's going on out there, unless. But maybe I'm misunderstanding your question.
No, I'm thinking look.
A yardstick's a yardstick.
Yeah, or marginally better in the health environment. So we're still bouncing along at that zero asymptote. To think that we shouldn't open up something in a more normal fashion.
I'm just going to point out, I'm not sure if you're saying it, but we haven't been at school, so when would we have a chance for our kids? Like, the number that says we have 0 kids in school affected doesn't move my needle at all, right? We haven't been at school.
No, I'm saying when school opens up.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're on the same page then. Yeah.
School will open.
Okay.
What it looks like is going to be the question.
Right. But the measurement stick doesn't change with what it looks like. The measurement stick is the measurement stick.
Right.
I think, right?
Correct.
I still hate the plan.
No, I know you do. But that's different.
Yeah.
You hate it for a different reason.
Well, call the vote.
Are we there?
are you making a motion?
So what's the motion you're asking for, Mike?
I think I'm asking for a motion to support the superintendent to execute the plan as proposed.
Do I have a motion?
Anything about, in the motion, anything about the plan moving forward with the additional metrics, or we can't do that tonight?
We can certainly add that.
To approve the plan with the addition of the,
To include,
the metrics of plans for increasing or decreasing the number based on the scientific data.
so let me make sure I get this right.
Made by Cindy, yes, vaguely.
Hold on. I'm just writing, I know that doesn't make great TV, but give me a second. What are we calling the thing that you want, John? What do you call it? What do you call
A
it, Mike?
specific plan for.
We're calling it reopening metrics.
Metrics
The
for the
reopening health data
opening
metrics?
to 100%, or adding students, or what do you want?
Okay, so
I don't know,
reopening health data metrics, is that okay? I don't care what.
I wasn't prepared to make a motion, so.
No, I'm asking you what you call it. I'm gonna propose the motion that I heard Mike said with this addition. Motion to allow the superintendent to execute his plan as proposed.
And a full written commitment how we're going to adhere to a review of to-be-determined metrics.
Yeah, which includes a reopening, or reopening health metrics.
Plan for the metrics. Okay, I think it's kind of what we said, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay.
Or no?
Well, I mean, sorting through a motion right now, at the end of the day, I'm not sure I still feel compelled that the process isn't going to tie down. There's no mechanism to push what I'm suggesting along.
Except the commitment that he said he will do it.
Then let the motion stand and vote for it or against it.
Well, again, you both said yes to you made a commitment. I still don't know what you're holding out for. I don't get it. I mean, I'm not trying to be aggressive. I don't know what you're missing.
I guess what I'm missing is you've sort of pigeonholed me into some language.
Not trying to do that, so.
I know, but I feel that's the way I feel.
All right, we have time, go ahead.
And so where do I land is I still don't think that there's a mechanism in place. The administration could wake up tomorrow, we've passed their hybrid model, and they spend no time or effort on this.
So, I mean, at what point do we, so I don't know how to answer that question other than.
I don't know. I mean, this is part of discourse.
Yep,
I apologize for interrupting.
No.
If you add it to the motion, well, whether you add it to the motion or not, we're going to do it. But I think adding it to the motion puts the teeth in it that you want to be able to follow up.
It must be done for it to happen.
So it's the teeth I'm missing, I think.
So do you want to propose some teeth?
I'd like the teeth proposed to me.
We don't know what you want.
Because we've said that the plan will move forward with the metrics.
But hold on, Cindy.
Yeah,
I don't know what language you want, so you're going to have to come up with your language. I can't give it to you because I don't understand what.
Right, and that's what I'm struggling with. It's
fair enough.
What I'm struggling with is I don't know that there are teeth. I don't know that there is a mechanism that compels the administration to execute what would make me feel comfortable as part of support for this plan.
Honestly, John, the words in any motion don't mean anything to me. Mike said he was going to do it. That's good enough for me. This motion is really about the language that you want. I can't give you something I don't understand. So we can break it into two pieces if you want, or I'm just not. I want to be a full partner with you on the board in how we proceed here tonight with what we're approving or voting on.
Yeah, Mike is on record. So let the motion stand, or I think all five of us could say, Mike, you owe us some information.
Well, there's a motion on the table, and apparently it's
not apparent. There's no. There's no motion on the table.
Okay.
Try to write one, right?
Oh, okay.
See a lot of eyes on me.
No pressure, no pressure.
I just have faith that if Mike says he will do it, Mike will do it, because his experience and my history with him, that he's done what he said he would do. And that's, you got to sometimes take a leap of faith with Mike.
We don't need the comments from the gallery, please.
I mean, I'm processing a lot of different cards right now.
It's a big issue, that's fine.
And one of them is I sort of want to ask Mike, okay, can you give me a firm commitment that you will have something in writing to the board that captures the essence of, and we've had enough conversations and there's been enough debate, that I think you know what I'm looking for. If you can commit to a date firm, then that, and if that's embedded in the motion, then I could support that motion.
I can commit to bringing something to you on August 10th, but I cannot commit to bringing something that you're looking for. Because I don't know what that is. I can bring a set of metrics on August 10th
That you're going to recommend.
that I will recommend.
And you will hold the administration accountable for. I mean, this is a plan. If we're going to have the plan that we're all here to talk about, and this is being added to the plan, this is part of it.
Of course.
Part of it is for the many parents, I would say a vast majority of parents, or at least a large majority, and students out there that want to get back to school. I'm looking for a firm commitment that if under XYZ circumstances that we're going to bicker about in the next couple of weeks, that we will get the maximum number of kids we can back into school under something that looks more like a year ago than what the current.
John, I get the impression you're looking for a commitment to put kids back in school, not a commitment to build a yardstick. And I'm hearing a commitment to build a yardstick. That's good enough for me. If you're looking for a commitment to put kids back in school, that's a whole different, I mean, I just want to be clear. Is that what you're looking for? Or?
Is one not a mechanism to get us to the same end?
To your point earlier, the mechanism could, that same yardstick could be used to take kids out of school, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a mechanism to get anything to any end. It's a mechanism by which to measure where we are.
So the answer to your question is, I'm not using this as a mechanism to get kids back in school. I'm looking at it as a mechanism to assess exactly where we are relative to health and other operational considerations. Yep. And we're either going forward, more kids in school, all kids in school with exceptions, remaining where we are, yep, because we just don't have enough information to make a directional change. And that's going to be a difficult discussion. Or pulling back and saying, we're seeing some bad things here, let's get them out. That's, yeah. So if you define that as the yardstick,
so
I'm not pushing to get kids back in school, I'm looking to get away.
You can do both, but I think we're talking about one is one thing and the other is the other. So again, I will go back and
mine is a subset of what you're defining.
I will posit to you that Mike has committed verbally already, and we can put it in any words you want in a motion that would say that he is going to deliver that piece of information, that yardstick, on August 10th.
That's what he
I've
said.
heard that, right? If we want to put it in the motion, we can do that, but I've heard he's going to do it. You want it in the motion for August 10th?
As per Mike's words, it's meaningless unless it's in writing.
Yep. Okay. Well, it's in the motion.
So the motion I have here, a motion to allow the
made,
superintendent to execute his plan as presented with the additional requirement of including a reopening health metrics plan, metric yardstick.
Reopening or full closing.
A health metrics yardstick.
Yeah.
Health metrics yardstick on August 10th.
Yes.
Are you okay with that motion? Is everybody okay with
Can you read
voting
it,
on that
can you
motion?
read it again?
Yeah. I don't believe you can read that.
I don't know if I can, right? A motion to allow the superintendent to execute his plan as presented with the addition of a health metrics yardstick to be delivered by August 10th. He could do it on the 9th if he wants it early. So I'm just looking down here, right?
So moved.
That-
Official?
Yeah, no, I haven't asked for it yet. I haven't asked for the motion.
Right, that motion still commits them to nothing, really. It just,
It commits it to August 10th.
It commits to building a yardstick by August 10th.
The yardstick you want by August the 10th.
okay.
And I would
know
also-
what discussion we're going to be having on August 9th.
Well, but that's fine. You should be, I would recommend you, that maybe you can participate in the group with the group that Mike wants to convene between now and the 10th. right?
I would be happy to do that.
Like, I can't offer those for you, but I would say, you know, I don't know if that helps, but.
You ready for it?
No, unless I'll make that to the pleasure of the board, but I would say no. We're not opening up for additional comments. Sorry, what?
Are you ready for the motion?
Hold on. So, yeah. No, I'm sorry, you can't. Can we finish our motion and then you can have, then I'll consider your minute. Thank you. Okay, where are we?
You want it to be official, you said? So moved?
So, John, you're still.
No, I am prepared to vote on the motion.
Okay. So, I'm just going to read it again. Right? The motion is to allow the superintendent to execute his plan as presented with the additional requirement of a health data yardstick to be produced by August 10th. May I have that motion, please?
So moved.
I have that motion made by Cindy Shagan. May I have a second?
Second.
Second by John Schneller. All in favor, we'll just roll call it. Sue?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Bill?
No.
Cindy?
Aye.
Jay? Aye. It's 4-1. Okay. No, thank you. No, thank you. So now we have a request from somebody in the audience for 1 minute.
Now we have 2. And then there will be 3.
Yep, go ahead. You can, 1 minute. Yep.
It's on Laura Dodge, by the way, 12 Canary Lane.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Laura Dodge, 12 Canary Lane. It's
you.
unfortunate that my 1 minute comes after the vote because it's moot, and I regret that I didn't speak earlier. But what I heard here tonight, and I've been here for 2 hours and 20 minutes like all of you, what I heard, the underlying common denominator was, we don't have enough information. We don't know the data. We don't have a plan in front of us that we could appropriately analyze and vote on. We just watched you guys formulate a motion for 25 minutes. That's what's disappointing. This plan should have been tabled. There wasn't enough information. And
No, thank you. Please, come on, folks. I mean, we're trying to be polite for everybody, right?
And it is a big issue, and people in this community are counting on you guys to do that. I respect that this is a difficult job. There's a lot of data that needs to be analyzed. What I would have preferred to see was this plan be tabled until August 10th, until those metrics could be performed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is Mike's school calendar change. Mr. Fournier.
One of the questions that we have, the administration and teachers have been working together on how to prepare for the fall. One of the requests that we have for the school board to consider is currently in our collective bargaining agreement with the Teachers Association, we have 6 professional development days, and 4 of those days are in August, and 2 of those days are at the other part of the year, November 3rd and March 9th. We are requesting that we move the start of school from August 26th, one day, to August 27th, and we use the 26th of August as a 5th professional development day for the professional staff.
Does that move one of the later ones back?
No, it adds, what it does is it ostensibly removes one student day and it adds one teacher day. We have all of our typical training. The 4 days are what we would typically do. The 5th day are going to be for all the additional pieces of required training to implement a plan such as this. And just as an FYI, the Commissioner of Education has allowed districts to be granted up to 3 additional days per school board approval. We are asking for 1.
Okay.
Sounds
Does anybody
like
have any objections to that?
No, considering the work that needs to go to professional development right now, I think it's a good idea.
Just so I understand.
Yep.
What's the extra day for? Just to sort out this mess that we just voted on?
No, during those 4 days, so for example, the state recently passed a law, there's 2 hours required suicide training. There's a number of trainings that are required, some of which includes teachers getting together those 4 days. Some are doing it in the summer, but some will be doing it when we get back. How to be teaching in a hybrid model, how to make improvements to the remote learning that we've discussed. So we have 3 data sources for that. So we'll be using those with the teachers, in addition to some other just typical things, like how are the students going to now navigate these classrooms? How are they going to properly take off and put on their masks? What are the rules around things like filling up their water bottles and not using certain parts of the just all the things that are going to be different in school for the students. Those teachers are going to be required to have training on that. We'll provide that so that they're ready for the kids on the 27th.
You good?
Yes, thank you.
So I'll take a motion to add the day as Mike has asked.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No.
That's 4-1.
I'll have it fed.
That's okay. That's okay. That's 4-1. Short subjects. Anyone? Anyone short subjects? Okay, I'll now hear a motion to enter non-public session.
I move that we go into non-public session for RSA 91A3, Roman numeral 2, is that L or I? L? I? Okay. For legal counsel.
Okay, so this is, as soon as we vote on this, the public meeting will be over, the cameras and everything will get turned off, and we'll go back to another room for a non-public session. So,
Second.
we need a roll call vote.
Need a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, we need a second.
Second.
Second by John Schneller. Sue?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Aye. So that's 5-0. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Good night, Bedford.
You voted yes on